License and registration, now. Marcus Webb's hands were already moving toward his wallet before the officer finished the sentence, but not in the way Officer Derek Holt expected. Webb announced each action as he performed it, his voice steady and measured. My license is in my wallet, back left pocket. Registration is in the glove box. I'm going to reach for both slowly. Is that clear? Holt was already at the window, one hand on the doorframe. He was 38, 12 years on Precinct 9's evening shift, and he'd made the mental shift the moment he saw the VSO decal on the rear window. Veterans of Foreign Wars. Post 1142. Veterans were cooperative. Veterans understood chain of command, understood procedure, understood that you didn't ask questions when you were asked to step out of the vehicle. That was the assumption that shaped his approach. A small straightening of the posture, a certain kind of certainty in how he held his position. Webb was a military credential wearing a driver's seat. Just get them out, Holt said. But Webb didn't move faster. He opened the wallet slowly. He removed the license. He kept the wallet on the passenger seat and reached for the glove box, his right hand visible the entire time, the license held between two fingers. The folder sat on the seat beside him, closed, held shut by a rubber band. Manila. Unremarkable except for the index card clipped to the first tab. Webb's phone was mounted on the dash with a small suction cup, angled toward the road ahead, and the screen showed an active upload counter ticking upward. 47 viewers. 48. Holt had not consciously registered either object yet. The folder was in his field of vision, but his attention had not landed on it. The phone was just a phone. Every driver had a phone mounted somewhere. I want to confirm you're asking me to reach into my pocket and open the glove box, Webb said. I'm going to perform both actions slowly. Is that clear? Holt didn't answer. He wanted the documents and wanted Webb to move faster. But Webb's slowness wasn't hesitation or fear. It was something else. The practiced restraint of someone who had learned that every movement in a traffic stop was a potential point of escalation, and that announcing each one in advance was the only insurance against misunderstanding. The tone carried no nervousness. That was what made it strange. Holt had pulled over hundreds of drivers. He knew what nervous sounded like. It sounded like quick breathing and apologetic explanations. It sounded like people trying to convince him they hadn't done what he'd just watched them do. Webb didn't sound apologetic. He sounded like he was narrating the steps of a procedure that had been rehearsed. Holt took the documents, license and registration. He looked at the name, Marcus Webb. He looked at the registration's issue date, current. He said, "Step here," and tapped the driver's side window with 2 fingers and walked back to his cruiser. The computer checks took 4 minutes. Everything came back clean. Webb's license was valid. The registration was current through March of next year, paid on time, no active recalls on the vehicle, no warrants, no priors. There was nothing. Holt sat for another minute anyway, running the scenario again in his head. The speed radar had caught the vehicle at 34 and a posted 30. That was the stop basis. That was legitimate. He could work with that. He got out of the cruiser and returned to the window. Webb's hands were at 10 and 2, and they hadn't moved. The live stream counter on the dash showed 47 viewers still watching. 2 shared notifications had popped up. There's an issue with your registration, Holt said. My registration is current through March of next year, Webb replied. What is the specific issue? Step out of the vehicle. Am I being detained? And what is the legal basis for the detention? Holt didn't answer. He repeated the step-out command, his voice a decibel louder now, as if volume could substitute for explanation. Webb asked again, what was the specific registration issue? Holt did not provide one. The folder remained on the passenger seat, and Holt's eyes had tracked it twice, not focusing on it, not reading it, but noticing it was there, in the way you notice something in your periphery that doesn't yet demand explanation. Webb opened the door and stepped out slowly, hands visible, and closed the door behind him. He positioned himself at the rear passenger door where Holt could see both hands. I don't consent to a search of this vehicle, he said, and his voice remained the same, level, clear, the voice of someone stating an established fact. Holt moved toward the open driver's side door. He was looking past Webb now, looking at the folder on the seat, and he asked, "What's in the folder?" "Paperwork related to my work." "What kind of work?" "Community documentation practice." Holt reached toward the door. "I need to see it." "There's no legal basis for that request," Webb said. "I'm stating for the record that I do not consent to you handling that folder or searching this vehicle." Holt's hand was still reaching. He paused. He was about to pull the folder toward him when Webb's voice came again, neither louder nor more insistent, but carrying a weight that Holt had not heard before. "You're going to want to read what's on the first tab before you do anything else." Holt stopped. He looked at Webb. He looked at the folder. For the first time, he actually looked at it, not just noticed it, but looked at it the way you look at something that might matter. He reached for it and pulled it toward him, the rubber band still holding it closed. Holt pulled the folder toward him and held it open on his lap, his cruiser's overhead light casting shadows across the pages. The first tab was laminated, printed with neat bureaucratic lettering, Precinct 9, Sustained Complaints, Officers of Record, 2018-2025. Behind it lay a single summary sheet, the numbers arranged in a clean hierarchy, 41 complaints compiled, 23 officers implicated, 38 sustained, 3 pending, and at the bottom, underlined in red marker so sharply the pen had scored the paper, 0 criminal referrals. Holt read the summary twice. He turned to the first individual complaint, IA case number 2-021-4417-003. The date was March of 2021. He read the badge number at the top of the form, 4417. His own badge. He felt something in his chest shift, a recognition that arrived before the full weight of it could register. The complaint described an unlawful detention, a black male motorist, 2 blocks north of this location. Same profile of traffic stop. The form had detailed notes from the complainant, careful entries about what the officer had said, what he had asked for, what he had failed to provide. The disposition stamp at the bottom read, "Sustained" in all capitals. Below that, in typed font, letter of reprimand issued, case closed. Holt looked up at Webb. Webb's hands were still visible, still at his sides. The live stream counter on the dash had climbed to 239 viewers. "Where did you get this?" Holt asked. "I compiled it," Webb said. "I filed most of them myself." "How?" "Through the IA complaint process, and through a veterans legal advocacy clinic that taught me the documentation procedure." Holt's grip on the folder tightened. The pages crinkled under his fingers. He was no longer holding a piece of paper that had simply appeared in a traffic stop. He was holding a record of his own sustained misconduct, filed by the driver he had just told to step out of a vehicle without legal basis. He wanted to stop reading. He kept reading. The second page bore another officer's name, then another. Some badge numbers appeared twice, even 3 times. His own appeared again on page 7, a 2023 complaint for an improper vehicle search. That one was marked pending. The list went on, 41 of them, organized chronologically, each one a failure to meet a standard someone had decided mattered. The folder contained 4 tabs. Holt could see the labels through the rubber band: FOIA responses, individual case files, judicial opinions, evidence exhibits. This was not a sheaf of papers. This was a case file that had been built over time, archived, organized as if someday it would need to be presented to someone who could do something about it. Holt closed the folder and held it on his lap for a moment. He looked at Webb. He looked at the folder. He looked back at the street ahead, where a car had slowed as it passed, its driver's head turning slightly toward the flashing lights. "What do you want?" he asked. "I want to know the legal basis for this stop. You were doing 34 in a 30. Your radar log will show whether that's accurate. I'd like to see it." Holt didn't move. He had made the stop based on a radar reading from his unit, which was accurate, but saying it now, after the folder had appeared, after his own badge number had stared back at him from a sustained complaint form, the statement felt exposed. It felt like a claim he had already lost the right to make. "You don't get to demand anything," he said. "I'm asking, for the record." The live stream viewer count had climbed to 312 by the time a second vehicle slowed on the cross street, its parking lights activating. The car came to a stop across the intersection, parallel to where Holt's cruiser sat idling. The driver's side door opened. Diane Okafor stepped out. She was 61, Black American, a community organizer who had been driving home from an evening meeting when she saw the blue and red lights. She did not cross the intersection. She stood by her car with her phone raised, angled toward the traffic stop 30 feet away, recording independently. The lens caught Holt's face full on. His expression turned toward the folder, his hand still gripping one corner of it. Holt saw her. "Ma'am, you need to move back." "I'm on a public sidewalk," Okafor said. Holt turned his attention back to Webb. "Nobody told you that you had a right to record me?" "The First Amendment covers recording public officials in public performance of their duties," Webb said. His tone had not changed. It remained procedural, precise. "Florida v. Bostic, Illinois v. Lidster. You're welcome to check." Holt looked at the live stream counter. It showed 401 viewers now. 2 of them had shared the stream. He looked back at Webb. "You've been planning this." "I've been documenting," Webb said. The sound of Okafor's car door closing, that soft metallic click, carried across the street, and it pulled something loose in Webb's memory. Another night, 2019. A Precinct 9 cruiser behind him on Meridian, blue and red light washing across his mirror in the same repeating pulse. The officer that night had called him son, had reached into the car without knocking on the window, had said there was nothing Webb could do about it. The kind of remark meant to settle something, to establish who decided what in this particular moment. Webb had driven home with his hands shaking. He had sat in his driveway for an hour. The next week, he had attended an intake appointment at the National Veterans Legal Services Program Clinic, and an attorney named Patricia Chen had put a blank IA complaint form on the desk between them and said, "Every time, every detail, date, badge number, exact words. Make them prove they didn't do it instead of you trying to prove they did." He had filed that first complaint 6 weeks later. It took him 4 months to find the right language, the right procedural steps. The complaint had been sustained 14 months after he filed it, a letter of reprimand to the officer, a notation in his file, and nothing that constituted anything close to accountability. Webb had filed a second complaint before the first was resolved. By the time that one came back sustained, he had already gathered 3 more. 7 years. That was the span between the night on Meridian and tonight, between the moment when an officer had said there was nothing Webb could do and the moment Webb was holding a folder containing 41 separate evidentiary records, each one a deliberate act of documentation. Holt opened the folder again. He turned pages slowly, as if looking for something that might change the meaning of what he was reading. "You know what this is?" he said. He did not wait for an answer. "This is 38 times a desk cop read a form and checked a box. It doesn't mean a damn thing happened." "Internal affairs determined it happened," Webb said. "That's what sustained means. IA does what it's told. You figured out how to game the process, filing complaints, getting activists to back you up, making noise until somebody decides it's easier to rubber stamp a complaint than to defend an officer. That's all this is." Holt believed it. The reader could see it in how he held the folder, in the way his jaw had tightened. To him, the complaint record was not evidence of misconduct. It was evidence of a system that had been captured, of institutional processes that had become weapons against the people who were supposed to be protected by them. Webb was not a citizen documenting abuse. Webb was an agitator who had learned how to weaponize paperwork. "You've been making problems for this precinct for years," Holt said. "I've been filing complaints through the established process." Webb replied, "If they were sustained, that is not a problem I created." "You should be careful," Holt said. "People like you always have a way of finding trouble." Webb's voice did not change register. It remained level, procedural. "Are you issuing a warning in response to my filing of administrative complaints?" "I'm giving you advice. I'm noting that this exchange is being recorded and that a threat in response to protected First Amendment activity and documented administrative process constitutes a retaliation claim under 42 U.S.C. Section 1983. I'm also noting the date and time. Webb paused. The live stream counter showed 537 viewers. Did you want to clarify your statement? Holt said nothing. He had said enough. He had revealed what he actually believed, what the folder had forced out of him. Not rage, but something closer to contempt. A certainty that documentation was a political tool rather than a civic instrument. That Webb was the problem, not the system that had sustained 38 complaints against officers in the same precinct. Webb walked to the rear passenger door and leaned against the frame. He reached through the open window and removed a single sheet of paper from the folder's third tab, a pre-completed internal affairs complaint form, blank except for the header and the date field, printed on pale yellow bond paper. He placed it on the hood of his car. He uncapped a pen. "What are you doing?" Holt asked. "Filing a complaint. I'm reading the fields aloud for the recording." Webb's pen moved across the form. Officer name, Derek Holt. Badge number, 4417. Date, today's date. Time, 7:52 p.m. Location, Precinct 9, 2 blocks outside Patrol Zone. Surface Road. He read each entry as he wrote it, his voice steady, the words becoming part of the permanent record being captured by the phone on the dash and by Okafor's phone across the street. Nature of the stop. Pretextual. Basis for extension of stop. Not provided when requested. Search, conducted without consent or probable cause. Reaching into vehicle, without consent, without warrant, without legal justification. Verbal warning issued in response to mention of prior complaint history. Language used, threat regarding future encounters. Witnesses present, Diane Okafor, recording independently. He signed his name, he dated it, he photographed the completed form with his phone, the image capturing the handwriting and the hood it rested on, and the officer standing 8 feet away watching him do it. "This is complaint number 42, Webb said. He looked at Holt. "This will be filed with the Civilian Review Board and the State Attorney General's Civil Rights Division by 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. The live stream archive is being saved. Miss. Okafor's recording is being saved. The body camera footage from your unit is evidence. The radar log is evidence. Everything about tonight is documented." He folded the completed form and placed it back in the folder. The rubber band stretched around it, holding everything together. Holt stared at the folder for a moment. He was no longer looking at 41 pieces of paper. He was looking at 42 pieces of paper. The last one still wet with ink. The last one filed in real time in front of multiple cameras. He was looking at a record that would be in 2 government offices by mid-morning. A record that would survive this moment, that would become part of an investigation file, that would arrive on the desk of someone with the authority to do something about it. He started to move toward Webb. Then he stopped. He got back into his cruiser without another word. 15 minutes after Webb photographed complaint 42 on the hood of his car, a supervisor's unmarked vehicle pulled into the parking lot behind Holt's cruiser. The blue lights were still flashing. The live stream viewer count had climbed to 667, and Holt was back in his vehicle with the doors closed, the folder on the passenger seat beside him, processing what he was going to do with the next 12 hours. Lieutenant Carol Ferris stepped out of the unmarked car. She was 47. No sustained complaints on file. Watch commander for Precinct 9's Thursday evening shift. Dispatch had flagged the stop as extended. Someone at the precinct had been monitoring the live stream, and Ferris had been briefed on the drive over. She knew Webb's name from the complaint files, knew there were 41 of them, knew the folder was real. She approached Webb directly. Not Holt, not the vehicle, Webb. "Mr. Webb," she said. "Lieutenant Ferris, I know your name from the files." "That makes sense," Webb replied. Ferris looked at the citation Holt had prepared, still sitting on the hood of the car beside the photographed complaint form. She looked at the folder. She looked back at Webb. "I'd like 24 hours before any state filing." "The Civilian Review Board filing goes in tonight," Webb said. "The AG filing depends on what happens with the citation." It was not a negotiation. It was a clarification of the calendar. Ferris understood the difference. She turned to Holt. who had gotten out of his cruiser now that a supervisor had arrived. "I need the radar log," she said. Holt retrieved it from his cruiser. The device had been calibrated 14 months ago. The departmental standard for radar unit recalibration was 6 months. The log entry for tonight's shift showed no pre-shift radar test conducted, a procedural requirement meant to verify the unit was functioning correctly before deployment. Ferris handed the log to Webb without comment. Webb photographed it. He looked at the calibration date. He looked at Ferris. "The citation won't stand," he said. "You initiated the stop using a device 14 months past its calibration date with no pre-shift test on record. There is no articulable basis for the stop that doesn't depend on that equipment." Ferris took the citation from Webb. She marked it void with a pen. She told Holt the citation was voided. Holt said the stop was still valid. He had observed the infraction independently, independent of any radar reading. Webb did not argue the point. He simply stated the procedural fact. The stop was initiated based on a radar reading from an uncalibrated device with no shift test, and that meant there was no factual basis for extending the stop beyond the initial observation. Ferris did not contradict him. She marked the citation void and placed it back on the hood. The live stream counter showed 743 viewers. Ferris turned to Holt. "Write your report," she said. "Keep it clean." She got back in her vehicle and drove away. Holt stood at the curb, looking at the voided citation. He looked at Webb. Something had shifted in his face, a tightening, a calculation. He turned to Ferris's taillights disappearing down the street, and he keyed his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 4417. I need a second unit at my location. Potential obstruction of a police investigation." The response came back in static. "Unit confirmation, ETA 4 minutes. Webb did not move. He did not try to leave. He understood what was happening. Holt was manufacturing a charge that did not depend on the radar log, a charge that could not be voided by a supervisor reviewing equipment logs. Obstruction required only that Webb had impeded the officer's duties. Everything that Webb had said, every legal citation, every procedural correction, could be reframed as interference. Officer Travis Mercer arrived 4 minutes later. 29 years old, 3 years on Precinct 9, no sustained complaints. Holt told him Webb had been obstructing the stop. Mercer did not review the body camera footage. He did not ask for clarification. He approached Webb and told him he was being detained pending an obstruction determination. He placed Webb in handcuffs. Webb's wrists went behind his back. The metal was cold. His voice did not change register. "I'm noting for the record that I am being placed in handcuffs," he said. "I have not physically impeded either officer at any point during this stop. Every exchange since the initial contact is on video from 2 independent angles." The live stream was still running from the dash mount. The camera captured Webb's back and Mercer's face in profile. The viewer count climbed steadily. 891, 912, 956. Each person who saw it was a witness that would outlast this moment. "I'm also noting that the citation issued during this stop has already been voided by the watch commander on scene due to equipment calibration issues." Webb continued. His tone remained procedurally precise. He was not pleading. He was building a record. "The radar unit has not been calibrated in 14 months, which exceeds the 6-month departmental standard by 8 months. There was no pre-shift test conducted this evening." Mercer looked at Holt. "What do you need?" he asked. "Just give me a minute," Holt said. The viewer count passed 1,000. 2 people had begun sharing the stream again. The live stream algorithm was beginning to push it. More phones were loading the page. Ferris's vehicle had not actually left. She had pulled around the corner and parked, and now she was walking back to the scene. She saw Webb in handcuffs. She saw Holt standing with his arms crossed, the voided citation in his pocket, the folder still visible through the car window. She approached Mercer and told him to stand by. She pulled Holt's body camera from its mount. She activated the review function and stood at the curb, watching the footage on fast forward. The moment Webb stepped out of the vehicle, the folder exchange, the Section 1983 statement about retaliation. She watched Holt's face during the exchange. She watched him reach into the vehicle without consent. She watched him retreat when Webb named the statute. She finished watching. She said nothing for a moment. Then she told Mercer to remove the handcuffs. She told Holt that Webb was not obstructing. She told him to write his report and return to patrol. Mercer removed the cuffs. Webb adjusted his wrists. He did not look at Ferris. He looked at the camera, at the phone on the dash, at the 1,102 viewers who had just watched him get released. Webb ended the live stream. The final viewer count was 1,847. The video had been shared 214 times. Diane Okafor crossed the street. She asked if Webb was all right. He said yes. She said she got it all, the handcuffing, the exchange with Ferris, everything. He said he knew. She asked whether Ferris would actually review the incident report before it went in, or whether she would let Holt make whatever changes he wanted. Her timestamp will be in the log, Webb said. Either way, the AG has to move this time, Okafor said. It depends on the report, Webb replied. They agreed to wait. The incident report would be written that night. The AG filing would wait until they saw what Holt had written. The following morning at 8:15 a.m., Webb was parked outside the municipal records office with a same-day expedited records request. He had both the incident report and the body camera log within 40 minutes. He opened the incident report first. The obstruction notation was gone. The stated reason for the stop had been changed from radar observation of speed infraction to observed traffic infraction. No reference to radar. No reference to the uncalibrated equipment. The report read as if Holt had simply observed Webb driving 34 miles per hour in a posted 30 zone, made a stop based on that independent observation, and found no basis for further action. But Webb also had the body camera log. It showed Holt's radar unit active at 7 hours, 42 minutes, and 11 seconds ppm, with a speed reading logged to the unit's internal memory. And the incident report bore a modification timestamp of 9:17 ppm, 19 minutes after Ferris's review log entry, which read 8:58 p.m. Webb called Okafor and read both documents to her, line by line, the calibration date, the missing pre-shift test, the radar reading in the body camera log, the original report language, the modified report language, the timestamps. That's perjury, Okafor said. That's what the state police will call it, Webb replied. The AG filing goes in at noon. He called Renata Osei, the civil rights attorney he had consulted with after his first stop, 6 weeks after that initial night in 2019. He read her the same documents. She said the falsification was the precipitating event, the moment a civil complaint became a criminal referral. She said the state attorney general's civil rights division would have to move on this. She said the timestamp discrepancy between Ferris's review and the report's modification was the evidence that transformed everything. At 10:47 a.m., Webb was sitting in a coffee shop near Precinct 9 when Ferris arrived. She came in civilian clothes. She had already read the incident report. She sat down across from him without preamble. Webb placed both documents on the table between them, the radar log, the incident report. Did you review the report before it went in? He asked. Yes, Ferris said. Did you approve the change in the stop basis from radar observation to observed infraction? Ferris was quiet for a moment, a long moment. I did not authorize that change, she said finally. I reviewed the original. It referenced the radar reading. I did not see this version. The metadata will show when the modification was made and by whom, Webb said. Your review timestamp is 8:58. The final modification is 9:17. 19 minutes. You reviewed the original. Somebody changed it after you signed off. Ferris said nothing. She looked at the documents. She looked at Webb. What are you asking me to do? She asked. Webb removed a blank complaint form from his folder and pushed it across the table. Protect yourself, he said. The AG filing goes in at noon. The falsification will be discovered. Your signature is on a report you reviewed before it was altered. You need to be on record about that before the investigation asks. Ferris looked at the form. She did not pick it up. She sat back in her chair. She understood what was being offered and what was being demanded. A choice between loyalty to Holt and institutional self-preservation. Webb was not forcing her hand. He was simply showing her what the hand would cost. The State Attorney General's Civil Rights Division office occupied a corner of the third floor, and by 12:03 p.m. on the morning Webb arrived with his attorney. Angela Kwan had already pulled his complaint history. She was 38, a staff attorney in the Civil Rights Unit, and she knew the numbers before Webb sat down. 42 complaints, 38 sustained, 23 officers implicated across one precinct. Webb placed the packet on her desk. Body camera footage, obtained through an expedited records request. The original radar log, the submitted incident report, a side-by-side timestamp comparison, the live stream archive with 1,847 viewers and 214 shares. Okafor's independently recorded video from across the street. Kwan reviewed them in order, methodically, the way someone reviews evidence that will eventually become the foundation of a federal investigation. When she reached the incident report modification, she stopped. She looked at the original document, which referenced the radar unit as the basis for the stop, and then at the final submitted version, which stated only observed traffic infraction with no device reference. She looked at the timeline. Ferris's review log, 8:58 p.m. The report's final modification, 9:17 p.m. 19 minutes. The radar reading still appeared in the body camera metadata, logged at 7 hours 42 minutes and 11 seconds p.m. But the narrative had been rewritten after the supervisor had already approved it. When did the Civilian Review Board complaint go in? Kwan asked. This morning, 9 a.m., simultaneously with this filing, Webb said. Are you represented? Not yet. Kwan set the documents down. She looked at Webb. You need an attorney for what this turns into, she said. Webb said he would have one by tomorrow. He already had Renata Osei's number. What happened next moved through institutional channels at the pace institutional channels move. By the following Monday, Holt was on administrative leave pending review of the incident report discrepancy. Ferris submitted a supplemental report to Internal Affairs stating that she had reviewed the original incident report, the one that referenced radar, and that the final submitted version did not reflect what she had reviewed. The city inspector general opened an inquiry. Holt's union representative advised him not to answer further questions. The falsification referral was forwarded to the state police for criminal investigation. 6 weeks after the traffic stop, Webb sat at his kitchen table with Renata Osei across from him and Angela Kwan on a conference call. The AG's office is opening a formal pattern and practice investigation of Precinct 9, Kwan said. We're covering all sustained complaints from 2018 to the present. The falsified incident report is the precipitating exhibit. That's what moved this from a civil complaint to an investigable institutional pattern. She also told him the Civilian Review Board hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks out. The board wanted to hear from him. Did he want to present? Webb said yes. Osei, sitting across from him at the table, said she would present the metadata and the timestamp analysis. It would be cleaner that way. Legal and technical. The board didn't need narrative theater. Webb shook his head. It's my document, he said. I put it in the record. The board isn't a jury, Osei replied. They don't need... I've been building this for 7 years. I'm not handing the last step to someone else. Osei didn't argue further. She understood what he meant. This wasn't about ego. It was about the difference between testifying about something and placing it in the record yourself, between describing what you found and showing what you found. 3 weeks later, Webb walked into a hearing room at City Hall, a long table, 5 civilian board members, 1 chair per person, overhead fluorescents casting everything in flat white light. Webb sat with Osei to his left. Holt sat with his union attorney to the right. Lieutenant Ferris was present as a witness, sitting in the back row, her face unreadable. The board chair confirmed the exhibits on record: body camera footage, radar calibration log, original incident report, modified incident report, timestamp analysis, the live stream archive, independent video recording from the scene. Holt's union attorney presented first. The stop had been valid based on Holt's independent observation of a moving infraction. The radar reading was supplementary, supportive, but not the basis for the stop. The incident report reflected a clarification of that observation, not a falsification. The handcuffing was a lawful temporary detention under Terry v. Ohio. Everything was procedure. Everything was defensible. The board chair turned to Osei. Does the complainant wish to respond? Osei started to stand. Webb touched her arm. She understood. She sat back down. Webb stood. He walked to the presentation table and opened the folder. The same folder. The manila folder with the rubber band. The one he had handed to Holt on the side of the road 6 weeks ago. He placed two documents side by side on the table facing the board members so they could see them both without turning their heads. On the left, the body camera log, a timestamp, 7 hours, 42 minutes, and 11 seconds p.m. Officer Derek Holt's radar unit, active, a speed reading, logged to memory. On the right, the incident report, a different timestamp, 9:17 p.m. The stated basis for the stop, observed traffic infraction, no reference to radar, no reference to the device, no reference to the reading that still existed in the body camera metadata at 7 hours, 42 minutes, and 11 seconds p.m. Webb read aloud, slowly, so everyone in the room could hear it the first time, so there would be no question about what the numbers meant. Body camera log timestamp, 7:42 and 11 seconds p.m. Radar unit active. Speed reading logged. He paused. He pointed to the incident report. Incident report timestamp, 9:17 p.m. Stated stop basis. Observed traffic infraction. No device reference. He pointed to a third document. Watch Commander's review log timestamp, 8:58 p.m. She reviewed the report before this version was filed. He looked at the board members. The report was modified 19 minutes after the watch commander reviewed it. The modification removed the only factual basis for the stop. He set the documents down. He said nothing else. He sat down. The union attorney asked for a brief recess. The board chair granted it. 5 minutes. Holt and his attorney left the room. Webb sat at the table with the folder open in front of him, both documents visible, and he did not move. When the recess ended, Holt's attorney announced they would be filing a response with the board within 14 days. The board chair thanked both parties. She said the board would deliberate and issue findings within 30 days. 30 days later, Webb opened an email in his kitchen. 3 attachments. The first was the Civilian Review Board's formal finding on complaint number 42. Sustained. Recommended action. Termination of Officer Derek Holt. Pending final review and approval by the police department. The second was a notification from the state police. A criminal investigation had been opened into the falsified incident report filed by Officer Holt on the evening of the traffic stop. The third was a press release from the Attorney General's office. A pattern and practice investigation into Precinct 9 had been formally initiated, covering a period of 7 years and examining 38 sustained complaints against 23 officers, with a projected consent decree timeline of 18 to 36 months. Webb opened the folder on the kitchen table, the manila folder, the one with the rubber band, the one he had carried to a traffic stop 6 weeks ago. He removed the index card from the first tab, the summary sheet, the one that had listed 41 complaints, 38 sustained, 23 officers, and 0 criminal referrals. He crossed out the 0, he wrote 1. 1 criminal referral, the first one in 7 years. A knock at the door. Diane Okafor stepped inside. She had seen the press release. She wanted to know if Webb had heard. He turned the folder so she could read the index card. She looked at it for a moment. She did not pick it up. She looked at Webb. 1 criminal referral, she said. 1, Webb said. What happens now? Now we wait, and we keep filing. Okafor looked at the folder again. She did not reach for it. She understood what it represented. Not a victory to be celebrated, but a threshold that had been crossed. A 0 that had become a 1. A number that changed because one man had shown up with documentation on a Thursday night and was ready. The folder sat on the table between them, the index card visible, the evidence of 7 years of disciplined attention to what could be recorded and preserved. Outside, the city moved on. Holt's union would fight the termination. The consent decree would take years. Other officers would file other stops. Other complaints would be filed. The institutional machinery would grind forward, slowly, the way it always did. But the 0 had become a 1. The record had changed. The folder held proof of that change, and it would remain on this table, available, ready, should anyone need to see what 7 years of documentation looked like when it finally landed. Marcus Webb filed 31 complaints himself over 7 years, each one following the same careful architecture: officer name, badge number, date, time, location, exact words, what he asked for and what he was denied. The clinic attorney had taught him after the first stop that precision matters because precision survives. When an officer's word stands alone in a room, it fills the room with authority unchallenged. But when the same pattern repeats 38 times across 23 officers, documented, dated, and sustained by a system designed to check itself, the word alone stops being enough. Documentation is not a weapon forged against anyone. It is the only proof that persists when everyone involved has moved on and forgotten what happened. The 0 had been on the index card for 7 years. 0 criminal referrals. On the morning Webb opened the email from the Civilian Review Board, he took the folder out and removed the index card. He looked at it. He crossed out the 0 with a pen. He wrote 1. That was not victory. That was the smallest unit of consequence. One number changing because one person had chosen to keep records. The folder sat on the table between Webb and Okafor, and neither reached for it to celebrate. They both understood what it meant. The folder was never intended to be a trophy or a weapon. It was meant to be a record. And now the record had changed.